forest did not awaken gently. It tore open with violence. A red fox lunged from the shadows, jaws snapping as silence cracked into chaos. A newborn fawn gasped against the damp earth, its thin legs trembling like reeds in the wind. The narrator whispered that life in this place offered no time for innocence, only choices between flight or death. The fox growled, its amber eyes blazing with hunger as the dawn light scattered through broken branches. Margaret said, "He must stand now, or he will never stand at all." The fawn's mother pressed close, her breath sharp, her flanks shivering with fear. The world held its breath. Survival began not with peace, but with a strike. The silence that followed was not peace but waiting, the kind that coils around the heart like a tightening snare. The fawn shook where he stood, every breath a fragile defiance. Margaret whispered that he had only moments before the fox struck again. The mother deer's eyes darted wildly, her ears twisting toward phantom sounds of danger. The fox paced, a crimson flame against the forest's pale dawn. Each second stretched like a thread about to snap. Nature, indifferent and merciless, tested them without pause. The air thickened, pressing down on the clearing, as if the forest itself demanded sacrifice. Margaret said, "He cannot fall again." The fawn's legs quivered, but still he held. The fox's tail swayed, its patience sharp and cruel. The mother deer stepped forward, her hooves drumming the soil like a warning. Yet no creature could promise safety. This was not a sanctuary, only a crucible. The dawn, for all its beauty, bore witness to fear sculpted into survival. The fox lunged a step closer, claws scraping dirt, and the fawn flinched. Margaret said, "Run, little one, run." But the fawn could only stagger, legs stiff with inexperience. The mother deer snorted, her body arching between predator and child. The forest rang with the sound of breath and heartbeat, the symphony of prey and hunter colliding in the raw law of existence. Then, as quickly as it came, the fox halted, its eyes glinting with something unreadable. Margaret said, "Even hunger waits for weakness." The fawn wobbled but stood, his mother pressing close, her warmth wrapping around him. For now, the predator only circled, testing their fear. Forest did not sigh in relief. It simply turned its gaze elsewhere. Dawn carried no promise of safety, only the cruel truth that survival was always borrowed time. The fox vanished into the underbrush, but its absence did not soothe the trembling fawn. His legs still shook, as though the ground itself threatened to collapse beneath him. Margaret said, "He has survived one trial, but his heart has not yet learned the rhythm of life here." The mother deer pressed her muzzle against his neck, her breath soft but urgent, guiding him to take one careful step forward. The dawn thickened into pale gold, wrapping the clearing in deceptive calm. Yet danger lingered, invisible but near. The forest was never truly empty. It only shifted its threats. The fawn stumbled forward, hooves sinking into damp soil, each motion uncertain but necessary. His mother walked just ahead, ears swiveling with constant vigilance. Margaret whispered, "This is not only walking, this is choosing life." The forest echoed faint bird calls, the distant crack of branches carried like warnings. Though the predator had gone, its ghost stalked each step. The fawn leaned into his mother's side, as though her body alone could shield him from the weight of survival. By the brook that cut through the clearing, the fawn paused, his reflection quivering on the rippling water. Margaret said, "He does not yet know the creature he sees is himself." The mother deer lowered her head to drink, muscles still tense beneath her fur. The fawn bent shakily, his nose brushing the cold surface before he recoiled with surprise. The water sang softly, but beneath it lay shadows of hunger, for even still streams carried the scent of predators. What was fragile here was always marked. The forest shifted, alive with hidden gazes. Birds scattered from treetops, and the fawn jerked his head, startled by the sudden rush of wings. Margaret murmured, "Even sound is an enemy when you are this small." His mother's steady stance anchored him, her gaze cutting into the shadows with fierce defiance. The fawn pressed close again, his body trembling against her warmth. For every heartbeat he survived, the wild demanded vigilance. Innocence was already fading, replaced by fear stitched into bone. The sun climbed higher, yet warmth did not erase dread. Margaret said, "Survival is not won in moments of battle alone, but in each quiet breath between." The fawn's legs steadied for the first time, his hooves holding the soil with fragile confidence. His mother touched her nose to his head, a fleeting promise that she would shield him as long as she could. But even her strength was borrowed. The forest carried no promises, only cycles. And soon another test would rise. The air thickened with unease. As the forest darkened, clouds drifting across the sun like a shroud. The fawn stepped forward, steadier now, yet his ears twitched at every rustle. Margaret said, "Peace in the wild is a mask. Beneath it waits the next strike." His mother's stance stiffened, her gaze fixed on a shadow slithering between trees. The predator had not vanished. It had only circled back. Hunger did not surrender. It stalked, patient as the roots beneath the soil. Wind rushed through the clearing, carrying the sharp scent of danger. The fawn froze, legs stiff, heart beating faster than his fragile chest could contain. Margaret whispered, "He learns now that the world does not forgive hesitation." The mother deer stomped her hoof against the earth, a warning to the hidden stalker. The fox, amber eyes glinted between the branches, its body coiled like a spring. The fawn leaned into his mother's side, his breath shallow, his innocence shrinking beneath the weight of dread. A crack split the silence, a branch snapping under hidden weight. The fawn startled, stumbling back, his legs nearly folding beneath him. Margaret said, "Every sound becomes a weapon in a place that never sleeps." The fox emerged slowly, each step deliberate, the hunger in its eyes burning like embers. The mother deer lowered her head, muscles rippling with defiance. Between predator and prey, time stretched into something merciless, holding both in its grip. The fight for survival was no longer a question of if, but when. The fox darted forward, claws tearing the ground, its body a blur of rust and fury. Margaret whispered, "Run, if your legs will carry you." The fawn lurched sideways, hooves slipping on damp leaves, breath ragged with terror. His mother charged forward, a barrier of muscle and instinct, forcing the predator back with desperate strength. For a heartbeat, the clearing burned with violence, the old law of hunter and hunted written once more across trembling earth. The fox halted, retreating only far enough to wait again, hunger gnawing at its patience. Margaret said, "He has not been spared, only given seconds borrowed." The fawn stood shaking, his body pressed tight to his mother's side, his eyes wide with the weight of lessons carved in fear. Crows circled, their cries echoing the truth. Survival was never gentle. The forest braced, knowing the day had only begun. What was spared in dawn would be tested again before dusk. The fox did not vanish into the shadows this time. Instead it lowered itself, eyes fixed but movements slowing. Margaret whispered, "This is no mindless killer. Hunger is its chain but not its choice." The fawn shivered, stepping closer to his mother. Yet the predator's gaze faltered, its ribs pressing sharp against its coat. It was no monster, only another life breaking under the same law. For the first time, the line between enemy and victim blurred, and survival wore the same face. The wind shifted, carrying the faint whimper of smaller voices deeper in the forest. Margaret said, "He is not alone. He carries mouths that wait for him." The fox's head turned slightly, ears twitching toward the sound. Hidden in the underbrush lay the faint cries of his young, fragile echoes of survival. The fawn's fear sharpened, yet Margaret's voice softened. Even the hunter is hunted by hunger greater than his own. What once was a villain revealed itself as a desperate parent. The mother deer lifted her head, her nostrils flaring as she sensed the shift. The predator was still danger, yet no longer faceless. Margaret whispered, "Nature writes no villains, only debts owed to life itself." The fox hesitated, torn between his starving kits and the trembling prey before him. The fawn pressed against his mother, innocence wide-eyed, while across the clearing stood another fragile existence unseen, waiting in silence. The truth of survival was not cruelty, but symmetry. Margaret said, "Every creature here bears its own burden, yet all debts are paid in blood." The fox turned, pacing with restless hunger, its tail flicking with agitation. The fawn's trembling legs locked as though rooted to the earth. The mother deer held her stance, not with rage, but recognition. They were bound in a cycle where innocence, strength, and desperation collided. The hidden truth emerged like dawn breaking through cloud. Survival was never about cruelty, only necessity. The forest quieted, as if listening to the weight of this revelation. The fox paused, ribs heaving, eyes torn between prey and duty to its unseen young. Margaret whispered, "There is no mercy here, only choices carved by hunger." The fawn's wide eyes mirrored the predator's desperation, two fragile lives bound by the same cruel law. In that moment, the audience understood. Survival was not a story of good and evil, but of fragile balances, forever shifting, forever owed. The stillness shattered when the fox lunged again, driven past hesitation by the gnawing cries of hunger echoing in his chest. Margaret said, "There is no pause when survival demands blood." The fawn stumbled back, his legs too weak to carry him far. The mother deer charged, hooves slamming the ground like thunder, eyes burning with defiance. Predator and protector collided, a storm of fur, teeth, and muscle, the forest trembling with their violence. The fawn stood helpless, caught between life and death's duel. The mother's hooves struck the soil, barely missing the fox as it twisted aside, jaws snapping inches from her flank. Margaret whispered, "Every strike risks failure, every heartbeat risks loss." The fawn bleated, a fragile cry that split the air like glass breaking. The fox spun, tail flashing, its hunger sharpened to desperation. The mother's body arched again, strength drawn from love, her stance towering like a wall against the rushing flame of her enemy. The fox lunged again, teeth grazing the mother's leg, drawing a streak of crimson. Margaret said, "The cost of love is always written in wounds." The deer staggered but did not yield, her eyes blazing with fury. The fawn pressed against a fallen log, his body trembling like a leaf in the storm. The predator growled low, lips curled, as if daring her to fall. Pain did not weaken her, it turned her defiance into fire. The clash surged louder, sharper, crueler. The mother lunged forward with explosive force, her hooves slamming against the fox's flank, sending it crashing against the soil. Margaret cried, "For every weakness she gives a strike of fury." The predator yelped, ribs rattling, yet even broken breath could not kill hunger. The fawn's eyes widened, innocence watching the brutal cost of protection. The forest itself roared in silence, the ancient rhythm of survival, thundering in every motion. The fox lay dazed, panting, ribs heaving with effort, but its eyes still burned with need. Margaret whispered, "This battle spares no one. Only time chooses who stands." The mother staggered, blood marking her fur, yet still she stood before her child. The fawn close, his breath ragged, heart echoing the rhythm of survival. Predator and prey locked eyes, neither yielding, both carved from the same desperate will to endure. The climax was not victory, but the endless strike of hunger against hope. The clearing fell into silence, broken only by ragged breaths. Margaret said, "Survival does not end in triumph, only in temporary stillness." The fox lay bruised but unbroken, his ribs rising and falling in desperate rhythm. The mother deer stood wounded, her blood painting the soil, her legs trembling, but her stance unyielding. The fawn pressed close against her, eyes wide with confusion, his innocence now scarred by fear. The battle was not victory, but delay. In the wild, nothing was ever won, only endured. The fox rose slowly, his movements labored, his hunger undefeated by pain. Margaret whispered, "Even in failure, need rises again." He cast one last glance toward the fawn before retreating into the shadows, not spared, only postponed. The mother lowered her head to nudge her trembling child, blood dripping with each breath. The fawn shivered but leaned into her, learning that love carried wounds and strength was not unbroken, only unyielding. The forest swallowed them both in silence. The brook trickled nearby, carrying crimson swirls from the mothers wound into the current. Margaret said the wild accepts all offerings, blood no less than water. The fawn bent to drink, his reflection trembling across the stream, a mirror of fragile defiance. The mother stood watchful, her body taut despite her pain. Above, the crows circled in patient silence, their dark wings a reminder that loss was never far. The forest bore witness, its indifference carved into every sound. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist, yet no warmth eased the weight pressing over the clearing. Margaret whispered, "Survival is not kindness, it is only continuation." The mother staggered but did not fall, her body carrying scars that told the cost of defiance. The fawn walked beside her, steadier now, though his innocence had withered under the morning's cruelty. The forest, vast and endless, remained unmoved, its shadows promising more trials. They had survived, but only for now. The clearing grew quiet again, but peace was a lie. Margaret said, "Nature is not cruel, nor merciful, it is absolute." The fox vanished into shadows to feed another hunger, the deer carried her wound like a crown of sacrifice, and the fawn carried new fear carved into his bones. Survival was not victory, but the right to take another breath. The circle had closed for now, yet dusk would open it again. In the forest, nothing ended, only continued. Dusk settled over the forest, shadows lengthening into endless corridors of silence. Margaret whispered, "The day began with blood, and it ends with breath stolen from fear." The fawn stood close to his mother, his eyes holding questions too old for his fragile frame. The air thickened, heavy with memory of violence, of hunger, of wounds that did not heal with light. The forest exhaled darkness, and in that breath the truth remained. Survival had no songs, only echoes that never faded. The fox did not return, but its presence lingered in every broken branch and scent upon the soil. Margaret said, "Absence does not mean safety, it only means waiting." The fawn lifted his head, his small body outlined by fading light, and for the first time he did not tremble. His mother lowered her neck, touching him gently, a reminder that survival was carved not in strength but in endurance. Night gathered, and the wild prepared for new hungers to rise. The brook whispered, carrying fragments of day into the night. Margaret whispered, "The forest does not remember the cries of prey, but it keeps the silence after." The fawn's reflection quivered on dark waters, his eyes wide, no longer unknowing but marked by what he had seen. His mother drank slowly, her wounds still raw, her body trembling beneath the weight of survival. Above them, stars pierced through the canopy, sharp and cold, silent witnesses to the cost of life endured. The crows returned, circling high above, their cries cutting across the silence. Margaret said, "They do not sing of victory, only of endings that come too soon." The fawn pressed close to his mother, the sound rattling his fragile frame. She lifted her head, eyes reflecting the cold fire of the stars, and in that gaze was not hope but defiance. They would walk deeper into shadow, not because it was safe, but because there was no other choice. The forest fell into silence again, a silence that would linger long after their steps were gone. Margaret whispered, "The echo of survival is not sound, it is memory." The fawn's cry pierced once, thin and sharp, before night swallowed it whole. His mother pressed against him, and together they vanished into darkness. The fox's eyes flickered faintly from the shadows, watching but not striking. The last line was carved by silence itself. Survival remains, but innocence does not.